Hello, well, right, the Love Symphony. So, the Love Symphony, I originally made it in 2011, starting it in December, and 2010, about March 2010, to the end of 2011 were quite difficult times for me, among the darkest times. I was just possessed by a strange and eternal anxiety that was overwhelming anxiety that prevented me from working, and it was exceptionally destructive. I barely slept for that whole 18-month period. But as a result of that, at the end of it, I felt a great relief, a great release. And in a way, the Love Symphony music itself vaguely echoes that in a way, because it starts off dark and then explodes into light, really, something like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And my early albums were strongly reminiscent of Jean-Michel Jarre, I suppose. I wanted to create electronic music that was symphonic anyway. I wasn't really concerned that it was electronic. I didn't want to emulate real-world instruments and try to use the technology in a clever way. I just wanted to create music, and the only option I had was electronic music, really. I didn't have a symphony to hand. And actually I ended up composing my own software, creating my own software. So all of the music I've made has been using software I've designed myself, just partly because I couldn't afford it, but also over the years it's become brilliant software. I can't imagine using anything better. I design software to be easy to use. That's the key thing. And so the Love Symphony came about through a gradual growing into more symphonic style music. Just before this I did something called The Infinite Forest, which was a soundtrack for a Korean role-playing game, and that used faux orchestral instruments like strings and woodwind and flutes and oboes and clarinets and things. So the Love Symphony used those instruments like a real symphony. It would be nice if it was performing the real symphony. But I didn't go out of my way to try and make it sound like a real orchestra. It just has to sound orchestra-ish. And sometimes electronic instruments can sound more grand. Often they don't, because they're badly performed or whatever. Compared to a real orchestra. A real orchestra, every single player puts their heart into the performance, and doing that electronically, although it's possible, is a massive amount of work. You have to basically imagine each instrument and as it would be played by another human. So let's talk about the music of the Love Symphony a bit. It's 9 tracks divided into 3 sections of 3, and in fact there's a theme of 3 throughout. In fact, it opens with a bell. Here is my mallet, my tubular bell mallet, which I made myself, and I made my tubular bell myself, or 3 tubular bells tuned to A, D and A again, and it opens with 3 tones, and those 3 tones appear throughout the piece. And the first track is a meandering and slow track called There Is No Love and The More I Search the Less I Find, and it's a slowly growing melody in a flute which ascends and ascends and seems to be searching for a resolution, a melody, a climax, something. It's looking for something, but it never settles down. It keeps growing, it keeps going up and up and up and never finding its place. Maybe like Samuel Barber's Adagio for Strings, and many other types of music follow a similar path. And then the melody enters different instruments appear, strings, brass, and somehow trying to find a way, trying to locate something. And indeed, most of the album is about searching. There are some quieter, more reflective tunes. There's one played entirely on harpsichord called Sunset, which is almost like a giving up of that quest. And there's also one about searching for God and perhaps being enticed by people, by a cult, to believe that love is just easy to find. Until we get to the grand finale, which is an explosion of joy at the end. Very much like the Beethoven's Ode to Joy, and in a way, like in the Great Ninth Symphony, in the Love Symphony, we've got melodies that eventually reveal themselves in the finale. It's one relatively simple melody, da 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 da, and yet it's actually three melodies that overlap and intertwine like a triple helix or plaits, all weaving over each other. And in fact, when I was composing it, one melody would naturally seem to fit with the first melody, which sometimes happens when composing anyway, but in this case there were three melodies and they all seemed to magically fit. It worked remarkably well. Perhaps there's something to do with the simplicity of it, or the way that faster and slower versions of the same melody just magically seem to fit. And in fact, I managed to compose the entire sequence and produce the entire 9-minute last section in only about 3 hours or something like that. It's also my first album to be commercially replicated on CD. Here's the CD copy, the first edition CD copy. There's only 50 of these. And they will change because every time I do a new issue of CDs, I tend to update the artwork or change it somehow to make each one special, each edition special. I'm very much a believer in CDs in the CD format, or at least art with visuals to go with it. I mean, vinyl is popular at the moment. I think that's perhaps a reaction against digital music, which is cold and dead and horrible and so ephemeral. I've experienced it myself. Digital music which vanishes into the ether. You think it's permanent. You think that the internet and things are going to be there forever, but they're not. Things vanish. And not only that, it's not valued as much. The quality is poor. It's not a serious listening experience. It's fine to have it on in the background or while you're doing other things or playing a game or in the car or driving or somehow doing something else. But for a serious sitting down and listening to a concert, I can't possibly imagine listening to digital music. It's just so valueless. Because there's nothing to it. It's really important to have a physical, actual thing that you buy and own. That's another thing about digital music. People are increasingly not letting people own it. They want to just charge you to listen to every single thing. But I believe in actual CDs. I think CDs themselves are a nice format. They're a nice size, very high quality, easy to play, and you can put lots of art into the package. I like proper jewel cases. CDs got gradually cheaper, the packaging, over the years, till you got cardboard sleeves and various things. But I like CD packages. And now all of my CDs come with 8-page booklets. In fact, the first issue of the Love Symphony has a 4-page colour booklet, but now they'll all have 8 pages. And the final thing I can say about the Love Symphony is, so I completed it in 2012, and then a couple of years later I had an exhibition in London called The Phenomenology of Love, which was my first solo exhibition in London. And because it was called The Phenomenology of Love, I thought it would be a good opportunity to do something with the Love Symphony. So actually 2 cinema screenings were booked for that exhibition, or I booked a couple. And I created a film for this, a 42-minute film to accompany the entire album. And for this I used stock footage. I think nowadays I'd probably try to film it all myself. Back then, in 2015, when I had to make this film, I've hardly had any experience of making any sorts of film at all. And film is such a complex and time-consuming endeavour that uses hundreds of people and lots of energy. So for this I had 2 weeks, an intense 2 weeks of creating a film from stock footage. So I explored lots of stock footage, and I wanted to assemble images that go with the music, that complement the music. It's not a story at all. It's abstract film. It uses images, loops, repetition, and colour and effects to convey something like orchestral music in visual form, and that's what I wanted to do. The quality of the images isn't always brilliant. In fact, sometimes it's terrible. I mean, you've got some images from the great San Francisco earthquake of, I think it was 1909 or something, and it's extremely grainy. But graininess isn't always a bad thing. Art is always a balance between purity and order and chaos, and digital images can be too clean at times. It's important to have a mix of both things. And also in grainy film you can see things that you don't get in digital film. The digital film is a bit boring somehow. So I wasn't too concerned about the quality. It was just the content that mattered more, really. So that film begins with a walk down a devastated landscape, and it's interspersed with the face of this of a girl who was burned, and that was from a public information film about the dangers of fires. And there's various other images in there. There's a wolf searching in the moon. There's something from the Nazi propaganda ministry as well, World War II film representing fear, really, fear and evil. And I've used colour as well in a similar way, the green representing fear, and red representing love or passion or violence perhaps as well, and then pink and white and all sorts of colours. I wanted to use film in a symphonic way, and so that's how that film came along. And so now I've decided to put that onto YouTube as well, the full entire film, and I've occasionally screened it as well. I screened it once in Chester Arts Centre. So that is a brief history of the Love Symphony.